Good evening. Well, welcome to session number 9 of Prophecy for the Last Hour. This has been an exciting adventure for me. I'm really kind of working through some major meat of the Bible, and tonight is going to be no shortage of some meat to be served up again for you seekers, believers, whoever wants to come. Praise God. Tonight I have about 4 titles. I couldn't quite zero in on one, but it's such a huge topic. I've got 4, so I'll give you my 4 titles. And the first title is, "This is the greatest identity theft the world has ever seen." Or we can call it, "The Science of Hindsight." Or we can call it, "Paul and the Mystery." Or we will call it, and where I will go right into it, I want to talk about the lost sheep of the whole house of Israel. This is, to me, one day I had what I consider to be, next to my born-again experience with the Lord, the greatest revelation I think I'd ever had. I've been saying over and over, I believe we're in a propaganda war. I don't take this thing at all lightly. I think the truth is constantly under siege, and you have to be very, very diligent. I think, so one day, the Lord works with us all individually and differently, and He has had this, I have had this walk with the Lord that is mine. What can I say? I've had a lot of dreams and visions and different things that have happened to me ever since I was a little girl, which is sort of always like, what is this? And then I became saved. Then I understood the ways of the Lord. I have continued to have had supernatural experiences with the Lord, just telling you. But one of the things the Lord did in my life was I have this old Bible that I call my Bible code. It's I think it's like an 1842 literal translations Bible. It's kind of rare. My sister bought it in a yard sale and brought it home. And when I first got saved, it was one of the first Bibles I ever picked up. It was just really kind of funny. I had no idea what Bibles were about. But there were all these little circles around certain verses, and it just intrigued me. And I started to see a pattern, and I started to really look at these, and I started to say, Lord, are you talking to me? Okay. One of the verses that really intrigued me, that was kind of boldly in pen circled, many in pencil, one in pen. I'm just giving you a little antidote here. Was this verse where Moses is told his commission, so to speak, to go in to Pharaoh and say, "Israel is my son, even my firstborn." Okay, now I thought, well, that's a great little statement. I mean, Moses, hey, all power to you. And he was successful. He got the children of Israel out of Egypt. But the full impact of that, I was clueless for many, 35 years of my Christian walk, until one day I thought it was time. And I said, okay, Lord, I'll sit down and I'll try to unpack that verse. Let's just start right there. Israel is mine, even my firstborn. Well, I got up after 12 hours to 14 hours, I think, that day, of just straight, flat-out Bible research, and I was never the same. Because I saw something, which I believe is the way the Lord does it, by revelation knowledge and spiritual understanding I had never seen. I had never been taught this, never heard this. This was even on my radar. And I don't think I am the least bit novel in this area in the body of Christ. So I just got to dive into it. Because I think it is one of the absolute keys that God is restoring to the church at this time so we can understand. He said we're living in an age, now the end of the age, of the restoration of all things. And this key, the lost sheep of the house of Israel, you'll just never understand the Old Testament. I never did. You just don't get it, because this is a large part of the storyline. So that being said, I just want to tell you right now, I am no longer a Gentile Christian. There is no such thing. There never was any animal like that. This is really crazy. But we call ourselves the elect, the bride, the ecclesia, which is actually my current term. I don't like the church. The church is the word, a Greek word called ecclesia, which means the called out. That's a very accurate term if you want to be precise. The body of Christ, the saints, the righteous, all Israel, the Israel of God, those who keep his commandments, the firstborn, the redeemed, those whose names are written in the book of life. These are just part and parcel of all the different ways that the prophets and God have spoken about his people, which is those of the Adamic race for the last, will be the total of 7,000 years, who want to get the ticket out, back to their first estate. Some of this stuff is so deep, some of this, I just want to tell you, that the rabbis, the sages of Israel, these unbelievable men of God who spent their whole life studying Torah all through the ages, some of this information, they could not even pass on till they were 50 years old, till they were mature, they were married, and they could only give it to 2 to 3 people. There were all these regulations. Some of the mysteries of God that he has hidden for the last days generation are so deep and past finding out, until God says, okay, I'm going to give you the skinny now. So anyways, the church today perceives itself to be not only God's people, but, and this is our problem, we think we're the only people he ever had or will. This is Paul warned us in Romans in this great whole chapter, 9, 10, 11. He said, be careful you don't get arrogant or conceited here. To think that you're the only people God is saving is a little arrogant, in my opinion. So we have read Bible passages, and we see our present-day church as being the focus of all Scripture. Very common trap to fall into. But what we fail to realize is that there will be people that will be saved through this whole 7,000-year period. People before the flood, people in ancient times, people from Old Testament Israel, people from the Gentile nations, people from the Gentiles of the New Testament times, people from out of the tribulation, people out of the future 1,000 reign of Christ on earth. See, in Hebrews it talks about in many ways and through different avenues, God has talked to his people. He has told his prophets and those he's used how he's working his salvation. And I come back to this over and over and over again. When it's all said and done, when the elect are called up beyond, when we are sitting with the Lord at the banquet supper of the Lamb, he will get all the glory. I'm convinced, he will single-handedly have worked salvation for the nations almost. It amazes me. But he's God. He is doing this thing, this march through history, his story, gathering his people, all those who want to be called by his name. So I told you, my little that I am technically today, I'd be called a Gentile Christian. But this key to understanding, now I would say, I'm an Ephraimite. Oh my gosh, I'm part of the lost tribes. I mean, how could I not? All right, now, so let me unpack, let me tell you why. This is the greatest story ever told. This is always and always the greatest story ever told. See, you have to, I say there are certain keys. I'm not saying, the keys in when Jesus came the first time. The whole nation, didn't know who this guy was, really couldn't put it all together except for a select few, a lot out of the Essenes, people who were really tracking their scriptures, because the scribes and Pharisees had stolen the keys. The people just didn't really understand. They were Hellenized, and it's going to be no different today. But, you have to understand, in order to see the whole big picture of the Bible, it is not a boring book. Oh my gosh, it is so exciting. It is so full of truth and wisdom and understanding, and every answer you ever want to see, but you just, you got to understand a couple of these keys to really understand it. Like, what happened in the garden? I really am going to unpack that. I keep threatening that I am. I am going to. It's going to be rather shocking. Genesis 6. You have to really understand what happened in Genesis 6. The sons of God cohabitating with the daughters of women. If you don't have that understanding, you are going to think God, you're just not going to understand what the flood was about. Nimrod versus Abraham. We have one verse in our Bible. One verse. Well, maybe two. About Nimrod. He was one of the most pivotal characters after the flood. He was a contemporary with Abraham, and the whole story of what was going on between Abraham and Nimrod has been completely stolen from us. And you cannot understand the whole point of God calling out a nation through Abraham, unless you understand what was going on again right after the flood, they went right back to it. And Nimrod was their guy again. All right? We are in a war, and the enemy is he never takes a day off. Divided kingdom. This is where we're going with this. You have to understand what happened, what the fallen tabernacle of David is all about. I mean, I read prophecy blogs and sites, and they're talking about, we live in the restoration of the tabernacle of David. Very few people understand what it's talking about, okay? You have to understand the history, and I'm just going to do a real quick history lesson, because I had never really even, as Gentile Christians, we like to quote our very favorite Old Testament verses. We really do we have some real favorites that we pull out, and they give us comfort and encouragement and solace and hope, and that's all good. But in terms of, I don't think we really, because we have replaced, we've got this replacement theology. There's been a lot of wrong doctrine. Hey, let me say it like it is. Paul says by the end of the church age, we're going to be full of doctrines of demons. I mean, that's a fact, and it is really a true fact. So you have to understand the history of Israel from this point of view. Now, Solomon, and this is something kind of crazy. Well, not crazy. It's just a fact. God says he judges the leaders and the elders first. Because honestly, if your leaders go south, most of the time the whole nation goes south. I mean, we're really just a bunch of sheep. Most nations of the world have been highly ruled by strong men. So he goes south, and that's a lot of time. That's it for a long time, until God raises up another deliverer can be raised up to set the people free again. But there's a really popular book right now, because let me just say this. We hear of this term. There's always the partial fulfillment of prophecy. Okay, and it's really true. It's really true. There have been many antichrists. There's been many partial fulfillments to a lot of these scriptures. And you know why? It's a very simple answer. It's because history repeats itself. That is an absolute fact. It just keeps going on and on. In every generation, you got different players, but the same things go on and on. History absolutely repeats itself. But praise God, there's an end to this thing very soon. And as I said, guys, it's going to be a quick wrap up, and you better get some oil in your lamp and some understanding of what is coming down. Because this is really exciting. One thing is, this whole thing excites me more than anything, because a lot of times you do need to focus on the enemy. What is he going to do? Because it says it's going to be a time of great tribulation. And it says that it will be a time that there's never been any time like it since really what happened between day 1 and day 2, the war in heaven. Now, that's a long time, people, and okay. So we are really coming up on a very pivotal part of the history of the creation of God. Now, Solomon became, obviously, the king after his son David. Now, the tabernacle of David means that there was a united kingdom. They were all focused on, it was the height. It was their glory days. Under David, and again under Solomon, but under David, they were a united kingdom. They had a king who had a heart after God, which is a very rare and precious thing. But that was David. And then his son. Now, Solomon started out, the story, and I won't even go into this, but, he did have a kind of heart for righteousness. He said, God, I want to lead these people with wisdom. I really want to do right by this thing. Now, I just want to read you something. There's another great book, and I just read. There's a great book out. It's called The Legends of the Jews. It's written by a rabbi, Ginsburg. I don't remember his first name, the turn of the century. This guy was just unbelievable. He put together all the mythologies, all the stories of Israel into one book. I say read it to your kids at night. It is unbelievable. It is packed with information. It's exciting. Why should you read Harry Potter when we can talk about our people, with the exploits that God has done through the centuries through his people? It's very exciting. But listen, this is in there. And there's a whole bunch of information about Solomon and how amazing his court was and why he did have this worldwide reputation. He was no backwater king. In the time of Solomon, it was a worldwide kingdom, and they are finding, even in America, all over the world, archaeology, of course, they won't put this on the front page of archaeology reviews, but it's true, deposits of Solomonic Davidic kingdom. Okay, coins and things they're finding, crests, things they're finding that prove that his kingdom was global. Now, it was let me just read this. It was the task of 7 heralds to keep Solomon reminded of his duties as king and judge. Now, this is talking about like his throne. And one of the things, if you read about this, Solomon had this unbelievable throne room, and then throne. It's rivaled the tabernacle, okay? I mean, it was just decked. I mean, there's some information. It's interesting. Okay, so the first one of the heralds approached him when he set his foot on the first step of the throne and began to recite the law for kings. Law number 1, he shall not multiply wives to himself. At the second step, the second herald reminded him he shall not multiply horses to himself. At the third, the next one of the heralds said, neither shall he greatly multiply to himself silver and gold. At the fourth step, he was told by the fourth herald, thou shalt not wrest judgment, which means forsake judgment. At the fifth step, by the fifth herald, thou shalt not respect persons. The sixth step, by the sixth herald, he was reminded, neither shalt thou take a gift, which is a bribe. Hear, elders of America today. Okay, I should say that. Finally, when he was about to seat himself upon the throne, the seventh herald cried out, know before whom thou standest. Now, I think that's pretty awesome, and that's pretty descriptive, because I'll tell you what, those are all the trip-ups for leadership. I'll tell you right there. God knew exactly. He told David, remember, you guys really don't want a king. Or, he told way back in the beginning, when they picked, not Samuel, that was the prophet. Saul, thank you, to be king. He said, you really don't want a king, because they're not good. They really usually end up bad. They usually go south, because power corrupts. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. So listen. You shall not set up wives, and this is the whole problem with Israel. This is a typology of adultery. You shall have no other gods. Having other wives. The deepest meaning of this is, you just cannot serve other gods. Either serve me, you can't love God, and you can't love mammon. Then he says, you can't multiply horses. You can't rely on your strength. Don't think your army, is going to make you big and bad. Neither shall you greatly multiply to your silver or your riches. Because, God gives all this to he gave all these things to Solomon. In all through Israel, they when they were in a blessed situation, and I think of America today, come on, just read between the lines. You cannot trust in your gold and your silver. Then he says, you shall have no respect to persons. You shall not wrest judgment. God is all about, I tell you what, he doesn't want sacrifice. He wants justice done. And if he's got to do it himself, that's called a judgment. If he's got to get justice for people groups and do it himself, that is not going to go down well on your record when you stand before him. In the sixth seal, neither shall you take a gift, a bribe. You just cannot rule righteously. And then seating upon himself, can you imagine? Can you imagine having the fear of the Lord to rule? Anyways. I just had to really go over that because I just love that. There's a guy today, Jonathan Cahn, very popular book. Wrote a book called The Harbinger. Everybody's reading it. You should be reading it. But, again, partial fulfillment of prophecy, really drawing the parallels between the northern kingdom of Israel, where they were and where we are. And you got to either have ears to hear, but if you are so dull of hearing and you just never get it, history repeats itself. Now, this is what is when Solomon just had carte blanche. He did have, the kingdom was united. They all got behind him. They built this amazing temple. They built him a great palace. They built up the city of Jerusalem to be this unbelievable international city. He had, storehouses, and he had, stations for his army. He had all over the country. They were unbelievably rich, prosperous, fat, happy, everything, okay? But it came at a cost. And this is it, that people were taxed like crazy. I mean, it's this kind of love-hate relationship. You want to have this great kingdom. I mean, who wouldn't want to look like the top dog, have the biggest, pearliest city on the block, okay? But it came at great cost. He did tax the people tremendously. But after his demise, when his son Jeroboam came on the scene, they were pretty much done. They had built their great nation. Everything looked spiffy. And the northern king tribes, okay, you understand Israel, 12 tribes divided up in the land. And 10 of the northern tribes came to Jeroboam. And the nation had switched now to the headquarters of the capital city being Jerusalem, which is down in the south. Came and said, look, we just want to go back and farm. We want to build up our own areas, municipalities now. We'd like to keep some of our own cash crops, money from our crops, and we'd like to build up our own areas and, keep some of our money in our, sounds like the Federalist versus the church, state rights kind of thing. We want to do it on our level. And we'll come down for the feast 3 times a year that we're supposed to. We'll stay within this whole thing. So Jeroboam said, okay, well, let me think about it. And he went and he consulted his friends, and he consulted his father, Solomon's advisors, which were still around, because he's a really young kid. I think he's like 21. I mean, I think he's kind of young. I'm not exactly sure, and then his peers. What should I do? These people are very insistent. They really want me to kind of change up the laws here a little bit, cut them some slack. Anyways, the elders, the advisors to Solomon, of people with a little more wisdom and understanding, said, look, if you cut these people some slack, they will be faithful to you forever. I mean, I think that's really a great thing. Politically, that's a great move. Okay, so then he goes to his friends, and they're like, oh my gosh, these are young swashbucklers. And they're like, what are you talking about? We got the reins now. We can rule. No, you go and tell them we're going to be even more demanding than your dad was. Man, and we really want to sit pretty. I mean, this history, this whole concept, you should, don't give a novice too much power because it'll go to his head. So, Solomon sided with his buds, and, there was a huge mutiny, and there was civil war. I mean, it was not pretty. There was a civil war. They were killing each other, and the north split away from the south, and that was it. We need to really understand this piece of Israel's history. There was a divided kingdom. From then on, and this is truly what we have to understand. From then on, you no longer had, the tabernacle of David had fallen down, and you had 2 nations now. Totally now. And God started coming on the scene with his prophets and saying, okay, Houston, we have a problem. And he started, and this is what trips everyone up in the Old Testament, because as you understand this, the 2 nations that God is still his people, he's going to save, but they are on different prophetic tracks. So you got to know who's who. You've got to have, okay, just let me hold on to that for a second. Let me just tell you, I did want to read something out of, in 2 Kings, where it is talking about what Solomon did, how he was so, because what God told Solomon, because, God saw everything he did. I mean, Solomon really blew it royal. A lot of even esoteric secret societies, I mean, a lot of stuff started in Solomon's reign that we just have no clue about. It just... Power corrupts, absolute power corrupts absolutely. And history has not really been written again, honestly, okay? But God told Solomon that he was going to take the kingdom from him because of his disobedience. He had like 900 wives, 600 of all the daughters of the nations that God told them over and over, these are your enemies. Do not marry into them. Do not make treaties with them. These are the people that are going to bring you down. These are the people that are hell-bent on bringing you down. Did Solomon listen? No. By the end of his reign, his heart, and God said, your heart will be totally against me if you keep this, and it was. So God said, all right, fine. Look, I'm going to have to take the kingdom away from you. He said, I'm not going to do it in your generation. I will do it in your sons, the next heirs generation. The kingdom will be split. And just like he said to Hezekiah, the same thing. So it happened, and it happened, and this is the history, and this is where you got to study your people. I mean, sometimes the Bible is really, because there are parts of it, it's like you get Jeroboam and Rehoboam, so you got to kind of keep them straight, who is who. It gets a little confusing sometimes, but just plow through it. You have the mind of Christ. You can do these things. But beginning with Isaiah, and this is a whole new ballgame, okay? We have now the seed of Abraham, and let's just, in how nothing takes God by, God even foreknew all this. I mean, this is the thing, he knows the end from the beginning. All things work together for good. He knew this. Some of the things, the prophecies that he told back in Deuteronomy, and he told Isaac, and when he was telling the patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, and I'm going to make you a multitude. Your seed will be as large as the sand on the sea and the stars in heaven. In other words, multitudes, innumerable amounts of people are going to come from your seed. And we've been over seed, his progeny, his offspring. So beginning with Isaiah, he's one of the first prophets that really starts now prophesying, along with his contemporaries, Amos and Micah, prophesying of the two tracks that these two kingdoms were going to go on. But the scattering, what we have here, and this is why I call this, the science of hindsight. We can look back and see all these scriptures fulfilled. It's so easy for us. Oh yeah, I see it now. So when the northern kingdom split, they went up, they founded their own government. They became their own nation. They had their own prophets. They started devising their own religion, basically. I mean, they just really got off track really fast. In 206 years, they went from being part of the tabernacle of David, being really kind of with the program, sons and daughters of the living El, to being so apostate, so completely like the nations around them, so infiltrated in 206 years. I mean, really and truly, that is quite fast. And so here you have in the history of Israel what, for the northern kingdom only, the first dispersion, it was a divorce, it was a separation, it became a scattering, and it ultimately, the good news, it's become a reconciliation, and it will be a complete restoration soon and very soon. But, in Deuteronomy, Yahweh, or I like to say Hashem, the name, because God's name is really unspeakable. But Hashem is a great Hebraic term to use for talking about the name. Will scatter you among all peoples from one end of the earth even to the other end of the earth. And there you shall serve other Elohims, which you have not known, you nor your fathers. That's from Deuteronomy 28. This is from Psalm 106, 27. And